Battlefield 6 has had a heck of a first week so far, exceeding expectations in a number of different areas, but any game dev can assure you that with a launch and millions of players jumping in, there's bound to be something that goes wrong. All things considered, while I acknowledge they exist, I personally have not encountered too many glaring problems and issues, but one of the biggest ones has a fix on the way, among many others to clean up the gameplay feel for Battlefield 6's experience. Today we're taking a look at these larger issues and the fixes inbound for them, so drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button if you're new and you'd like to stay up to date with all things Battlefield 6, Arc Raiders, and even more FPS content coming. We're chasing down 700,000 subscribers, and I'd love to have you in the community if you'd like to join. For now though, let's take a look at the top level changes coming soon. So first, probably one of the most problematic things here is the bloom or bullet spread issue in Battlefield 6. Now, what is this if you don't know what we're talking about? You've probably noticed it even if you don't necessarily know what we're mentioning here initially. But this is a case of you'll be firing and what feels like you're perfectly aligned with where you're shooting at, you're just not hitting at all. Normally, this isn't something that's like widely noticed. Bloom or spread isn't something that's necessarily new and exclusive to Battlefield 6, and it's not necessarily something that's inherently wrong, mimicking real-world deviations, and it's something that even developers like Florian from the DICE team, the principal game designer, he's mentioned that bullets fired are from the barrel, which is below your reticle, and you'll need to have that distance between where those angles end up meeting. That roughly being around 50 to 100 meters, depending on the scope you're using. That means that within close range, you might actually need to aim a little higher because of the bullet's spawning position, and that all weapons are 0 to 50 meters by default, except for precision weapons like sniper rifles that are 0 to 100 meters. This means that in very close range, you might have to aim a few pixels higher. So by default, the pinpoint precision is dependent upon factors that won't always equal right where your red dot or something is, but the spread of that deviation is where the question comes into play. Spread and bloom has a cone that will tighten and widen at certain points in your movements, in your positioning, things like that. Think of it almost like how you were to, say, hip firing or sliding or something like that. Your standard crosshair spread would widen in that sense to visualize that you're going to have a wider spread and cone of where your shots will go, thus denoting that your accuracy is going to decrease. That spread is going to be wider. Now apply that same sort of like mental visual to while you're ADS, but much tighter of a spread than what you'd see with like a hip fire or something. Now obviously your margin of error in a sense is much smaller, but you'll still have some horizontal and vertical deviation thrown into the mix when full auto. However, right now within Battlefield 6, it appears that these are just much worse and broken in some capacity, whereas others are a little less affected. I would like you to go and use, say, like the defaulted MP5 or another SMG and compare it with your experience at range compared to like a rifle. You'll probably find a night and day difference right now in control and in shot placement, which then disrupts the entirety of the sort of classification ecosystem for gunplay. When you have classifications of weapons not being nearly as accurate as they should be and allowing other weapons to step into that position, you have things like your SMGs and shotguns, which are predominantly used for close range. Realistically, those SMGs are then outclassing rifles for more mid-range combat, which is not great for the overall health of the gameplay experience. Now, thankfully, this was noted and a fix is on the way, and strangely, it's actually independent of what we saw within the beta, because we did see this earlier in the Battlefield 6 beta, where it was then tethered to a slide animation, where if you canceled a slide before you completed it fully, that sort of sliding spread, that cone of deviation, would then become your regular ADS cone of deviation. But this time around, they said the beta bug was actually fixed, but we've identified another issue, two in fact, that impacts dispersion and bloom in an unintended way and will cause you to have more dispersion at times. The team is working on this and we're looking at general balance tuning of dispersion too. So while it looks like we're going to have this fixed in some capacity, if not fully, it's also going to be something they adjust the general dispersion across classes, it seems like, as well, making even more fine-tuning that what we have right now for even those weapons that feel a bit better than others, they're still going to feel a little bit different, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. We don't entirely know. Next up, movement has been in question as well, where a lot of players are in one camp or the other. They think the movement has been drastically cut at the knees, some people still thinking it's way too crazy and should be toned down even more. But regardless how you feel about it, it seems like there might be a sort of middle ground between where we were and where we are right now, as we end up hearing that we won't go back to the open beta movement, but we're working on some slight adjustments that will help with some parts that feel a bit clunky. We'll share more about that as soon as we can. So while no details, it does seem like we're going to get some sort of middle ground, something that's a bit more of a compromise, but again, until we see more of that, we don't quite know. And then some additional changes that have already been tracked, and we are going to see some fixes for in the relatively near future. Players bouncing off of ladders. I don't know if you've seen clips of that, but if you jump or climb up a ladder in a certain way, it will literally just like springboard you across the map a little bit. Console players not being able to adjust acceleration settings, class active abilities not working, the supply bags getting bugged when players deploy it in complex geometry. So like if you put it on an incline or in rubble, that was something that I noticed quite a bit in my gameplay. There was also the mention that supply bags also wouldn't adequately refill your ammo and gear as much as it should be. There's a bug that will make reticles fly off screen when going from a sprint to crouch. If you change your weapon loadout while playing, the cursor will move outside of the map from the deployment screen. There's error messages for no servers found purchased, that coming in Portal server browsers. The unlock markers are bugged. Players also, one of the biggest ones that I can't wait to be fixed, is that players cannot equip a new weapon attachment in the same match. This basically just resetting everything if it's from, I think, a weapon package. I don't know if it's tethered directly to that, but basically you just are not able to change your attachments, and everything you make ends up defaulting back to what it was beforehand. Those are known issues that will have fixes coming. One thing that I'm curious if we will see any sort of adjustment to is the core sort of nature of progression. And this, I say, for all intents and purposes, should be, of course, something that lasts longer than a game like Call of Duty. This is not a game that's going to be replaced in the next year or perhaps even the year after that. So, of course, progression should be still a grind. However, it's in a bit of a weird spot right now where, especially for weaponry, it's not something that goes by rather quickly. You have these attachments that will be actually like weapon altering and the ones you want to get to. The good stuff, it's much later on. So, no, this is coming from someone who is still having a fine time grinding out the game. I am entirely neutral on this. I don't really care one way or the other. I'm still playing, having a great time, personally speaking. But I do think we're kind of in this odd limbo spot where in progression, it's a little too long. The opposite side kind of the coin, or the pendulum swinging too far the other way compared to what we saw in the beta progression, where, of course, yeah, it was the beta. You only had it for 2 windows of a closed beta and then an open beta, where you, of course, had a much limited time to play with things. So obviously, they wanted to make sure people got through the ranks and could experience everything. But it seems like that pendulum swung too far the other way with the full launch here, where you may be limiting the potential for a lot of players by keeping progression so slow that you kind of risk burning out players before they even get to the parts of the weapons or anything, or their overall ranking grind, that they don't get to experience as much as they'd like to before that sort of burnout phase, or that feeling of like, okay, I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And I think this can be readily seen by the abundance of bot farming that we've already seen, with EA even making changes to and removing entirely some Portal servers that serve the purpose of only farming XP. Also making some limited changes for scoring and player counts that, again, try to limit that as much as possible without devaluing the entirety of Portal. But this back and forth with the inevitability of that was going to happen. The moment Portal was announced, you knew that was going to be happening, with XP progression having the chance to be 1-to-1. But it's this weird sort of limbo period where I don't think it needs to be exponentially increased, but for the interest of getting players to engage with as much of the game as possible, I understand where right now this progression system is creating quite a debate. But that, I don't know if we'll actually see too much talk about that or much change about it, but it's definitely a discussion worth having at the moment. But when will these other changes come into play? The ones we do know are actually tracked, do have fixes on the way. For me, personally speaking, I think that the Bloom one, or the weapon spread, that's going to be like a first come basis where it's going to be fixed as soon as possible, whereas the other ones could be thrown into a hotfix or an actual title update that, depending on severity of the bug of the issue at hand, it might not necessarily be the first come, first serve type of thing with that. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. DICE and EA have been pretty quick at fixing quite a few things already by releasing a few smaller updates, not necessarily waiting for a larger update to include fixes into the game. So who knows? But for right now, those are the things that we know of that are kind of like larger ticket issues and items that are, again, worth a discussion and do have, in most cases, some fix or update coming to them. So what do you think of all this stuff here? Is there anything in particular you guys are really hoping to see fixed or adjusted when it comes to the gameplay experience for Battlefield 6?